Captain Amara Graves stared out the viewing window of the Terran Vanguard as the stars stretched into lines, her mind fixed on the mission ahead. The message had come through suddenly, as unexpected as a storm. The Black Ship is near. The Black Ship, a ghost from humanity's past. No one had seen it for over 30 years. It had been a part of the last great war against the Torvathi Empire, a powerful Terran warship that had mysteriously vanished. The rumors about it were legendary, almost like a myth. Some said it was destroyed. Others whispered it had simply disappeared into the darkness of deep space. But now, somehow, it had returned. Captain, Lieutenant Naomi Tran called from the communications console, breaking the silence in the command center. We've detected the ship's signature. It's coming from Sector 21X. We're within range. Graves turned to face her officer. The excitement in Naomi's voice was hard to miss, but there was something else. Something like fear. The Black Ship was no ordinary vessel. There were tales that it was more than just a ship. Some believed it had been imbued with unknown, possibly alien, technology. And if that were true, who knew what kind of danger it posed? Plot a course for the coordinates, Captain Graves ordered, her voice steady. But be careful. I want all shields at maximum. Prepare the boarding team. We're going in. The crew of the Vanguard worked quickly, each person falling into their role with practiced ease. The ship moved toward the coordinates, the hum of the engines a steady reminder of the danger that lay ahead. Graves knew she had no choice but to investigate. If the Black Ship had reappeared, it was either a weapon, one that could be used against the Torvathi, or it was something worse. As the minutes passed, Graves couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in her gut. The Black Ship had always been a symbol of Terran power, but now it seemed to be a symbol of something far more ominous. What if it was a trap? What if it had been waiting for the right moment to strike, its true purpose still hidden beneath its silent, ancient surface? The Vanguard arrived at the coordinates, and the massive shape of the Black Ship appeared before them, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the stars. Its form was imposing, a hulking mass of metal with scars across its surface, as if it had endured countless battles. There was something eerie about the ship, the way it hung there in space, lifeless, yet still full of presence. "Captain, we're receiving a signal," Naomi said, her voice tight with tension. It's a distress call, but there's something strange about it. It's been repeating the same message over and over." Graves moved to Naomi's side, looking at the flickering screen. The message was brief, cryptic. "The darkness remembers." "Is that it?" Graves asked. Naomi nodded. "That's all. No other information." Graves took a deep breath, trying to shake the unease that clung to her. "Send a response. Tell them we're here to help." No sooner had Naomi sent the message than the ship's communication system flared to life. The Black Ship's systems were reactivating, responding as if it had been waiting for something or someone to trigger it. "The ship's reactor is coming online," Lieutenant Work reported, his voice laced with disbelief. "It's drawing power from something." "Can we get a visual?" Graves asked, her heart pounding. Naomi's fingers flew over the controls. The large screen in front of them flickered, and then filled with an image of the Black Ship's interior, a dark, quiet maze of hallways and rooms, as though the ship had been abandoned long ago. But it was not empty. The lights flickered to life, casting shadows in every corner, and then the message repeated again, clearer than before. "The darkness remembers." Graves' breath caught in her throat. Something was wrong. This was not just an old ship. It was alive. Alive in a way that shouldn't be possible. The ship wasn't just receiving power, it was reacting to something, and that something might very well be humanity. "All hands, prepare for boarding," Graves said, her voice firm despite the dread creeping through her. "We're going in. But remember, this ship is dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with." Her team worked quickly, donning their gear and preparing for the operation. Graves could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders. She had never been one to believe in superstition or ghost stories, but the black ship felt different. The stories surrounding it, the rumors of it being more than just a ship, were starting to feel too real. As the boarding team geared up and prepared to depart, the ship's doors slowly opened, revealing the path to the heart of the black ship. The eerie hum of its systems vibrated through the hull as Graves and her team stepped into the unknown, determined to uncover the truth. But no one could deny the feeling that something, or someone, was watching them from the shadows. And whatever it was not welcoming them back. The air inside the black ship was stale, filled with the smell of long-forgotten metal and something colder, almost metallic. Captain Amara Graves led the boarding team down the darkened corridor, her boots echoing with each step on the old metal floor. The ship felt like a tomb, silent and still, with only the soft hum of its barely functional systems providing any sound. She glanced over her shoulder at her team. Lieutenant Naomi Tran was close behind her, eyes scanning every corner, while Sergeant Lucas Work kept his rifle raised, alert for any sign of movement. The rest of the team moved in formation, their faces grim, their eyes trained on their surroundings. The feeling in the air was heavy, like something was waiting for them, something unseen. "This place gives me the creeps," Rourke muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper. "It's like the ship's watching us." Graves didn't respond immediately, though she shared his unease. She had never believed in superstition, but this place, it felt different. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, faint energy coursing through them. She couldn't explain it, but every step she took felt like they were walking deeper into something ancient and unknowable. "We stick to the plan," Graves said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Find the ship's control center and determine what happened to the crew. We have no idea how long this place has been abandoned. Let's not assume anything." "Understood," Naomi said, "but I still don't like it." The team moved deeper into the ship, their flashlights cutting through the shadows as they passed rooms filled with strange, half-finished machinery. Some of the technology was familiar, but most of it was alien. Foreign designs that no human engineer could have built. There were interfaces that hummed with energy, screens that flickered but showed no readable data, and wires that seemed to pulse faintly like veins under the ship's skin. Graves stopped in front of one of the consoles, studying it closely. The screen was blank, but faint writing seemed to shimmer across its surface, just out of focus, like a memory trying to come back. She reached forward, brushing her fingers against it. As soon as her hand touched the surface, the screen flickered to life, revealing a set of cryptic symbols. "Captain," Naomi said from behind, her voice tight with urgency. "I found something. Over here." Graves turned to find Naomi standing in a doorway, staring into a dark room. The walls were lined with what looked like old human medical equipment, but the equipment was worn and rusted, as though it hadn't been used in years. However, what drew Naomi's attention wasn't the equipment. It was the small stasis pod at the center of the room. "Is that?" Graves began, but her voice trailed off. She recognized it immediately. It was a stasis pod, a type used to preserve a person in deep sleep. Naomi carefully approached the pod, her flashlight revealing a face inside. It was a man, his features obscured by the thick glass, but his uniform clearly identified him as a member of the original black ship crew. "Let's get him out," Graves ordered. The team quickly worked to release the man from the pod. When the hatch opened, a rush of cold air filled the room. The stasis pod had done its job, keeping the man alive all these years. But what had happened to him? Why had the black ship kept him preserved for so long? Naomi checked his vitals. "He's alive, but in poor condition. His brain activity is minimal. He may have been in stasis for much longer than expected." Graves nodded. "We need to get him back to the Vanguard and wake him up. He may know something about what happened here." As Naomi and the others carefully lifted the man, Graves' mind raced. They were uncovering more questions than answers. How had this man survived all these years? And why had the black ship chosen to save him? keeping him locked away in stasis. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ship's systems had been waiting for them, drawing them into its web. But why? They made their way back toward the entrance, but just as they were about to exit, a sound, low and ominous, echoed through the ship. It was distant, but unmistakable, the sound of something heavy moving in the shadows. Graves signaled for the team to stop. Every eye turned toward the sound. The air seemed to freeze in anticipation. For a moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, the ship's lights flickered on and off, casting long, twisting shadows down the corridors. What the hell was that? Rourke whispered, his grip tightening on his rifle. Graves didn't have an answer, but she knew they weren't alone. Whatever had been in the ship, whatever had caused the black ship to vanish, was waking up. Move out. Now, Graves ordered, her voice firm. She didn't want to panic the team, but they needed to move quickly. The team rushed toward the exit, their footsteps quickening as they made their way back toward the docking bay. Behind them, the sound of something, some presence, followed. It was subtle, a shifting in the air, but it was there, and it was drawing closer. Graves' heart raced. They had to leave the ship now, before whatever haunted its dark halls found them. Captain Amara Graves' heart raced as her team moved quickly down the narrow corridors of the black ship. The faint echo of their hurried footsteps was the only sound in the ship's eerie silence. But it wasn't just the silence that unsettled her. It was the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the ship's old systems sounding louder than it should. "Stay alert," Graves said, her voice low but firm. She glanced over at Naomi, who was just ahead, her hand gripping her rifle with white knuckles. The others were equally tense, all eyes scanning the dark corners of the ship. It was clear they weren't alone. As they approached the docking bay, the sound of the ship's systems came to a sudden, eerie stop. The low hum that had filled the ship's hallways cut off, leaving only an unnatural silence in its wake. Graves felt a chill run through her. What was happening? "Captain, we've lost power to the docking bay doors," Naomi reported, her voice tense. "I can't get them open." "What about the backup systems?" Graves asked, trying to stay calm. Naomi's fingers flew over her console, but after a moment, she shook her head. No response. "It's like the ship is shutting down. I don't think we can leave through here." Graves cursed under her breath. This wasn't good. They had to get back to the Vanguard, and fast. But it seemed the black ship was making sure that didn't happen. Whatever force was controlling the ship wasn't going to let them go so easily. "We'll try the maintenance hatch. If we can't get through here, we'll find another way," Graves said, keeping her voice steady. "Move out." The team quickly turned and made their way toward the maintenance section, a narrow passageway lined with tangled wires and machinery. The lights flickered above them, casting long shadows on the walls. Graves couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was closing in on them, trapping them inside. As they reached the maintenance hatch, Naomi managed to get the door open. A blast of cold air rushed out, making everyone shiver. Inside, the small room was filled with strange, unfamiliar equipment, parts of the ship that seemed as old as time itself. "What the hell is all this?" Rourke muttered, his voice filled with awe and confusion. Graves didn't have an answer. She stepped into the room, and her boots crunched on the cold floor. There, in the center of the room, was a large terminal, its screen flickering with strange symbols. "Can you make anything out of this?" Graves asked Naomi. Naomi moved quickly to the terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. The screen flickered again, and for a moment, it showed nothing but static. But then, slowly, the symbols began to shift, forming coherent shapes. "It's a message," Naomi said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's for the Torvathi. The message is meant for them." Graves narrowed her eyes. A message for the Torvathi. Why would the black ship be trying to communicate with their enemies? She stepped closer to the terminal, leaning over Naomi's shoulder to get a better look. The message that appeared on the screen was cryptic, but unmistakable. "Humanity's judgment has arrived. The word sent a chill down Graves' spine. What did it mean? Why was the black ship sending this message to the Torvethi? And more importantly, why was it directed at humanity? Was this the ship's true purpose? Had it come to destroy humanity, or had it come to protect them? "We need to tell command about this," Graves said, her voice steady despite the confusion and fear swirling inside her. "This is bigger than anything we've dealt with." Naomi nodded, her fingers tapping quickly on the console. "I'm sending the message back to the Vanguard now. They need to know what we found." As Naomi sent the message, the black ship began to hum again, the power systems flickering back to life. Graves glanced up, her senses alert. Something was wrong, too wrong. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach. Suddenly, the walls of the ship trembled. The ground beneath their feet shifted slightly, as if the entire ship was waking up, becoming aware of their presence. Graves turned toward the door to the maintenance room, her hand resting on her sidearm. The others did the same, eyes scanning the darkness outside. "Stay sharp," Graves ordered. "We don't know what's happening, but we can't take any chances." As if on cue, the entire ship shook, this time more violently. The lights above flickered, then went out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, leaving them in an abyss of uncertainty. "Captain, what the hell is going on?" Rourke's voice came through the darkness, his tone tight with fear. "I don't know, but I'm not staying to find out," Graves said, her voice unwavering. "Move out. We're getting back to the Vanguard, now." The team quickly moved toward the exit, the sounds of the black ship growing louder, more oppressive, as if it were alive. The walls seemed to close in, and the air felt thicker, heavier. Whatever was happening, the ship was no longer an abandoned relic. It was a force, something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Graves' heart pounded in her chest as she led the team back toward the docking bay. She didn't know what the black ship was, or why it had returned, but one thing was certain. Humanity was about to face something far beyond anything it had ever encountered before. The dark corridors of the black ship seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in ways that made it feel like the ship itself was alive. Captain Amara Graves kept her focus, though her heart was racing. The team moved quickly but cautiously, their steps echoing in the unsettling silence. The sudden shake of the ship earlier had only deepened the unease that already filled the air. "We need to hurry," Graves said, her voice firm despite the fear crawling up her spine. "If we don't get back to the Vanguard soon, we might not make it out of here." Lieutenant Naomi Tran nodded, her face pale but determined. "We're almost there, Captain. Just a little further." The team kept moving, their rifles raised, scanning every corner. The air in the corridors grew heavier with each step, and every shadow seemed to stretch toward them, as if the ship itself was trying to pull them deeper into its bowels. "Captain," Sergeant Lucas Rourke said, his voice low, "I don't like the way this place feels. It's not just the ship, it's the energy. Something's wrong." Graves glanced over her shoulder at Rourke, who was scanning the darkened hallway behind them. She could see the tension in his posture, the tight grip he had on his rifle. He wasn't the only one feeling it. The black ship was a relic, a machine that should have been forgotten, but something about it was different, alive, even. Before Graves could respond, Naomi's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we're close. I can see the docking bay ahead." Graves felt a surge of relief. They had made it this far, and getting back to the Vanguard was within reach. But as they approached the docking bay doors, something unexpected happened. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered once again, this time casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. The team stopped, weapons raised, eyes darting to every corner. Graves motioned for them to remain silent. They all knew what this meant. The sound of something, no, someone, moving came from the darkness. A soft scrape, followed by a low mechanical hum. Graves' breath caught in her throat. The black ship was not empty. It never had been. "Captain," Naomi whispered, her eyes wide. "We're not alone." A figure emerged from the shadows, slowly, deliberately. At first, Graves thought it might be one of the original crew members, someone who had survived. But then she saw the figure clearly. Its face was obscured by a helmet, and its body was covered in a strange suit, unlike anything human. The figure moved toward them with unnatural speed, its footsteps silent against the metal floor. "Get ready," Graves ordered, her voice tight with fear. The figure raised its hand, and before anyone could react, it spoke, its voice distorted by the helmet. "You shouldn't have come." Graves felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The voice was human, but there was something wrong with it. Something off. The figure's suit appeared to be old, worn, as though it had been aboard the ship for decades. "Who are you?" Graves demanded, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "What are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it took a step forward, and the air around them seemed to grow colder, denser. It was as if the very atmosphere was thickening, suffocating them. Naomi stepped forward, her hand hovering near her weapon. "Captain, we need to move." Graves didn't respond immediately. She was focused on the figure. There was something about it, something familiar, yet alien. It didn't seem hostile, but it certainly wasn't offering any answers. The figure raised its hand again, this time pointing toward the far wall. Graves followed its gesture, and to her surprise, the wall shifted. Metal plates moved with a grinding sound, revealing a hidden door. "Go," the figure said, its voice echoing through the corridor. Graves didn't hesitate. She gestured for her team to follow and moved toward the door. As they passed the figure, Graves glanced at it one last time. Its helmeted face remained emotionless, but she could sense the deep sadness behind its presence. Something tragic had happened here, a tragedy that had somehow connected this being to the black ship. The team entered the hidden room, and the door sealed behind them. Inside, the room was filled with advanced technology, glowing softly in the dim light. But at the center of the room, on a raised platform, was a large, transparent container. It looked like a stasis pod, but this one was far more advanced than any Graves had ever seen. Naomi approached the pod cautiously, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Captain, this is impossible." Graves moved to Naomi's side, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside the pod, suspended in some kind of fluid, was a figure. It was human, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its body was emaciated, as if it had been preserved for centuries. "What is this?" Graves whispered, her voice barely audible. Naomi hesitated, then reached out to touch the pod's surface. The moment her fingers made contact, the figure inside the pod's eyes snapped open, glowing with an eerie light. Graves jumped back, heart racing. The figure inside the pod was alive, and it was looking directly at them. "Who are you?" Graves demanded, her voice urgent. "What is this place?" The figure's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, a voice filled their minds, clear and cold. "Humanity's judgment has arrived." The words echoed in Graves' mind, and she felt a deep sense of dread settle over her. The ship was alive, and it had been waiting for them. Whatever had happened here, whatever was about to happen, was far beyond anything they had ever faced. Captain Amara Graves' breath caught in her throat as the figure inside the stasis pod opened its eyes. The eerie glow in its gaze seemed to pierce through the darkness of the room. And for a moment, Graves felt as if the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The strange figure's lips moved again, but this time the words came not through sound, but through her mind, a cold, emotionless voice that echoed in her thoughts. "Humanity's judgment has arrived." The words sent a shiver down Graves' spine. She stepped back, her heart pounding. This was no ordinary being. It was something ancient, something beyond her understanding. She turned to Naomi, her mind racing. "Do you have any idea what this means?" Graves asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. Naomi shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on the figure. I don't know, Captain. But whatever it is, it's connected to the ship, connected to us. Sergeant Lucas Rourke, standing near the doorway, gripped his rifle tighter. We need to get out of here. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't look like it's here to help. Graves nodded, her mind reeling. She knew they couldn't stay here much longer, but the figure in the pod, it was something they couldn't just leave behind. It held answers. Answers to the mystery of the black ship and the strange messages that had been transmitted. What had happened to the crew? Why had this being been preserved? And why was it speaking of judgment? Suddenly, the figure's hand began to move, slowly reaching toward the pod's glass surface. Graves' instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt frozen to the ground. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the figure's every motion. There was something about it, something powerful and ancient, that demanded her attention. As the figure's fingers brushed the glass, a low hum filled the room. The lights flickered again, and the temperature seemed to drop even further, as if the ship itself was reacting to the being's movement. Captain, we need to leave. Now, Naomi urged, her voice filled with urgency. But Graves didn't move. She couldn't. It was as if the being was calling to her, beckoning her to stay. Before she could respond, the room suddenly went dark. The power surged off in an instant, and the ship shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. The walls rattled, and the ground beneath them trembled. What's happening? Rourke shouted, as the lights flickered back on. But when they did, the figure was gone. The pod was empty. Graves' pulse quickened. She rushed to the pod, her hand outstretched to the cold glass. No, this can't be. Naomi stepped forward, her voice calm but tense. Captain, the ship. Before Naomi could finish, a loud crash echoed through the room. Something was moving, something fast, just beyond the walls. The sound of clanging metal reverberated, and Graves knew it wasn't a mechanical malfunction. Something, or someone, was on the ship, something that had been waiting. The room filled with an intense pressure, as if the ship itself was closing in on them. Graves' mind raced. Whatever they had awakened, whatever this being was, it was no longer contained. They had unleashed something far more dangerous than they realized. We have to get out of here, Graves said, her voice firm. Now. The team quickly moved toward the exit, but before they could reach the door, the walls seemed to shift, blocking their path. The corridor outside was no longer the one they had come from. The ship had changed. The black ship itself had become a labyrinth, its walls moving, shifting with a mind of their own. Captain, we're trapped, Rourke said, his voice tight with panic. The whole damn ship is closing in on us. Graves' mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting against the very ship itself. The black ship was alive, and it was actively preventing them from escaping. We can't stay here, Graves said, her eyes scanning the room for any way out. There must be a way to override the systems. Naomi, get to the control panel. Naomi moved quickly, her fingers flying over the interface of the nearest terminal. Her brow furrowed as she tried to get a response from the ship's systems. The terminal flickered, sparking intermittently. Come on, Naomi muttered under her breath. But there was no response. Graves turned to Rourke. Get ready. Whatever happens, we fight our way out. As Naomi continued to work on the terminal, the ship's shaking intensified, and the lights flickered again, this time plunging them into complete darkness. The team stood motionless, waiting, their senses heightened. Suddenly, the voice from before, cold, emotionless, spoke again in their minds. Your fate is sealed. Humanity is judged. Graves' heart raced. She knew the black ship had been waiting for them, but she hadn't realized the full scale of the danger. This wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, an instrument of something far greater. And now that it had made contact with them, There was no turning back. Naomi's voice broke through the silence. "I've got it. The door should open now." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them trembled again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just the ship shifting, it was something else. The walls seemed to pulse, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the trembling stopped. The door to the corridor beyond opened with a low hiss, and the team rushed forward. They didn't look back. They couldn't. The black ship was closing in on them, its systems alive with purpose, and they had to escape before the judgment they had awakened was realized. The team rushed through the newly opened door, their hearts racing, their minds consumed by the chaos around them. The black ship had turned against them. The walls had shifted, the corridors were no longer familiar, and the ship itself seemed to have a will of its own. With every step they took, it felt like the ship was pushing back, trying to prevent their escape. "Keep moving," Graves shouted, her voice sharp, her eyes scanning the changing hallways. The lights flickered again, casting long, distorted shadows across the metal walls. It was hard to know if they were heading in the right direction or walking deeper into a trap. Sergeant Lucas Work's heavy breathing echoed behind her. "Captain, what the hell is happening? This ship, it's alive." Naomi Tran, keeping close to the terminal she had just used, glanced over her shoulder. "It's not just alive, Sergeant. It's aware of us. We've triggered something, and now the ship's systems are actively preventing us from leaving. We're not in control anymore." Graves' eyes narrowed. "We can't afford to panic. We need to stay focused. The docking bay is still ahead. We get to the Vanguard, and we get the hell out of here." But even as she spoke, the ship groaned beneath their feet, a deep mechanical noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The walls, which had once seemed solid, now appeared to ripple, as though they were shifting in response to their every move. "Captain, look," Naomi called, pointing ahead. Graves squinted through the dim light. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, silent, and dressed in the same strange suit as the one they had encountered earlier. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it were waiting for them. The figure's helmet gleamed in the flickering light, but its face was hidden, shrouded in mystery. "What is that?" Rourke hissed under his breath, his hand tightening on his weapon. Graves raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Stay calm. We don't know if it's hostile." They cautiously approached the figure, the air growing heavier as they drew closer. The figure didn't move or speak, but as they neared, it raised its hand and pointed in the direction they had just come from. The gesture was unmistakable. It was as if the figure was telling them to turn around, to stop moving forward. "Captain, I don't like this," Naomi muttered, eyes darting to the exit. "It's blocking our way." Graves took a deep breath. "We can't turn back. The Vanguard is our only chance." She stepped forward, her boots tapping lightly against the cold floor. But as she moved, the figure made another motion, this time toward its chest. It seemed to be removing something hidden under its suit. Before Graves could react, the figure held up a small device, a strange, metallic object that hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. As the device glowed, a blue light washed over the team, momentarily blinding them. "Captain," Naomi shouted, reaching out to grab Graves' arm. But it was too late. In an instant, the world around them shifted. The walls, the floor, even the air itself seemed to dissolve, leaving them floating in a vast, empty void. There was no light, no sound, just the sensation of floating, suspended in nothingness. Graves's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see her team. She couldn't see anything. It was as if they had been ripped out of reality itself. "Captain," Rourke's voice echoed, distant and muffled. "Where are we?" Graves struggled to move, but it felt as if her body was weightless, disconnected from the ground. She tried to reach out, but her hands were met only by the cold, empty air. And then, slowly, a low, distorted voice filled the void, vibrating through her bones. You have crossed the threshold. Graves's heart raced as the voice continued, speaking directly to her thoughts, not through the air. Humanity's time has come. Judgment is upon you. The words echoed in her mind, but they didn't feel like a threat. There was a strange sense of finality in them, as though the decision had already been made. The ship, this ancient entity, had come to deliver something far beyond their understanding. "Captain," Naomi's voice broke through the silence. What is this? What's happening?" Graves swallowed, trying to focus on the message. "I don't know, but we're not alone. This ship, or whatever it is trying to communicate. We need to understand what it wants." A sudden flash of light erupted around them, and the team was pulled back into the familiar cold corridors of the black ship. The gravity returned, and they collapsed to the floor, disoriented but alive. "Get up," Graves ordered, pulling herself to her feet. "We've got no time to waste." Rourke groaned, pushing himself off the floor. What the hell just happened? Naomi stood shakily, her hands gripping the nearby wall for support. "I don't know, but it felt like we were in another dimension, or like the ship was testing us." "Testing," Graves repeated, her mind racing. "It's not just a ship, it's something else. And now it knows we're here. We have to move before it decides our fate." The team quickly regained their bearings, heading for the docking bay once again. The corridors were still shifting, still warping as they made their way through. The ship wasn't going to make this easy. It was alive, and it had a purpose. But whatever that purpose was, Graves wasn't about to let it claim them. They had to escape, or humanity's judgment would become a reality. The Vanguard was their only hope. The cold, eerie silence of the black ship pressed in on Captain Amara Graves and her team as they moved down the winding corridors. The walls seemed to shift and bend around them, making it impossible to tell which way was forward and which way was back. The ship was no longer a mere vessel. It had become a living entity, and every step they took felt like a step deeper into its heart. "We're almost there," Graves said, her voice tight with determination. She could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure of time running out. If they didn't reach the Vanguard soon, they might never escape. Naomi Tran, who had remained unusually quiet since their encounter with the strange figure, gave a shaky nod. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up, Captain. The ship is moving faster now. It's closing in on us." Sergeant Lucas Work's grip on his rifle tightened. He scanned the dark corridors, his eyes alert to every flicker and shift in the shadows. "This place, it feels like it's hunting us." Graves didn't respond, her mind focused on the task at hand. They had no choice but to push forward. They had to make it to the Vanguard and get back to their fleet before the black ship trapped them for good. Suddenly, the ship groaned beneath their feet, and the walls began to ripple once again. It was as if the ship was alive, pulsating with an eerie energy. The lights above them flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them. "We've got company," Rourke growled, his hand hovering near his weapon. He wasn't wrong. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead, tall, silent, and once again clad in the strange suit they had seen before. The figure's helmet gleamed, but its face remained hidden. "Stay alert," Graves whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her own weapon. But she didn't raise it just yet. They needed information, not violence. The figure stopped in front of them, standing motionless. Then, slowly, it raised its hand toward them, the strange device from earlier appearing once again in its grasp. The blue light emanated from the device, and Graves felt the familiar sensation of being pulled into something beyond her understanding. "You are at the threshold," the voice echoed in her mind, cold and final. "Humanity has been weighed." Graves felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't just speaking to her anymore, it was speaking to all of them. "Your fate is sealed. The choice is yours." Rourke's voice broke through the tension. "What choice? What do you mean?" The figure's helmeted face tilted slightly, as if considering the question. The path you choose will determine your future. Humanity's judgment has already begun. Graves didn't know what to say. They were trapped in a moment that felt like it was suspended between two realities. The black ship had been waiting for them, guiding them, and now it was offering them a choice. But what was the choice? And what would happen if they made the wrong one? The figure stepped back slowly, its motion deliberate. The device in its hand began to glow brighter, and suddenly the ship seemed to respond. The walls shifted once again, and ahead of them, the docking bay doors creaked open. "This is it," Graves said, her voice low but steady. "We have to move. Now." Without another word, she turned and ran toward the open docking bay, followed closely by her team. Every step they took seemed to echo in the vast silence of the ship, but there was no time to think. They had to make it to the Vanguard. As they ran, Graves could feel the ship's grip tightening. It was trying to pull them back, to keep them from reaching the bay. The walls closed in, the corridors shifted, but they pressed on. There was no turning back. Finally, they reached the docking bay. The Vanguard stood there, waiting for them. Graves didn't hesitate. She rushed toward the ship, her heart pounding, her mind focused only on the mission. But as she reached the entrance, the figure from earlier appeared again, standing between them and the Vanguard. Its hand was raised, and the device glowed with an almost blinding light. "Your journey does not end here," the voice echoed again. "You may leave, but you will not escape judgment. Humanity's time has come." Graves stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She knew they couldn't stay here, but the figure was offering something. Something more than just an escape. A chance for humanity to change, to choose a new path. "What do you want from us?" Graves asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain strong. The figure tilted its head again, and the glowing device flickered in its hand. "The decision is yours. Choose wisely." Without another word, the figure stepped aside, allowing them access to the Vanguard. Graves hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, her team following closely behind her. The figure's presence still loomed in the air, but they didn't look back. They couldn't. As they boarded the Vanguard, the doors closed behind them, sealing them in. Graves took one last look at the black ship, which now seemed distant, as if it was fading from reality. The Vanguard began to power up, the engines humming to life. Graves felt a wave of relief wash over her as the ship slowly lifted off the ground. But even as they broke free from the black ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's judgment was far from over. They had escaped, but the black ship had left its mark on them. Whatever path lay ahead, they would have to face it together.